Kamala Harris has gone from vice president to presumptive Democratic nominee for president of the United States. This after President Biden decided to step away from his 2024 election bid. Things are moving very quickly. We are talking about it all tonight. We begin with Doug Sloan, Democratic strategist and former first vice president of the DC chapter of the NAACP. Doug, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us tonight is Dr. Melanie Campbell, President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. Dr. Campbell, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Honored to be here. Good to see you. Good to see you both, brothers.
So let me start with you, Dr. Campbell. And it makes me just wonder, gosh, there's just so much to ask because this has been such a really, really fast-moving situation, as I just mentioned. The Vice President, Kamala Harris, had her first public comments today after President Biden stepped away from his re-election bid. There was an event at the White House. She gave President Biden a great deal of praise, but already, as we have seen within the last 18 hours, there has been a major shift for her as far as a campaigner. Your thoughts about where we are in this moment?
We are in a seismic shift, a moment that we can't say that we saw coming other than what was going on. Because what I mean by that is we were clear. Black women, we came together. We were, really organizing, not in my day hat, but as Melanie Campbell, Power the Ballot Action Fund chair, really saying to the elite in the Democratic Party that they couldn't ignore 14 million votes. We had been organizing around that and pushing for that Biden-Harris ticket to stay. But we also said if for some reason President Biden would step down, then the next would be the vice president, and that's Vice President Kamala Harris. But the response was tremendous. I was on a call. I work real closely with the Women Black Women. We had a call that had 44,000 people on it, men and women, not just Black, mostly Black, right? And in 2.5 hours raised $1.5 million for her campaign. I hadn't seen that kind of response from Black people since President Obama ran the first time. So
tell me about that. Tell me about that call, Dr. Campbell. What was said on that call? I've heard so much about this. 47,000 people on that call, mostly women. What did you hear?
Well, the focus really, part of it was lifting up the moment and being in the moment that is what I call historic, right? The fact that you do have, for the second time, a woman potentially, because she has to get through the nomination process, being the top of the ticket for the Democratic Party. That in itself is historic. And also really talking about what this means and what has to be done in order to make sure that it's not just a moment, but actually gets across the finish line. So there's a lot of conversation, a lot of lifting up even of President Biden, who had, and thanking him for his leadership, being elected, I think the first time when he was 29 years old. Here he was at 81 years old, and had given up something. It's hard to give up power, right?
Yeah.
For anybody. And so you're talking about, I'm one that believes that the way it was done was not the way it should have been done. But he had to ultimately make that decision. And so it's a lot of that last night. It was also people signing up. I think last count, I hadn't talked to Joe Taker, but I believe it was over 5,000 people signed up to volunteer for that campaign. People in their on their personal capacities. But that was the energy, and the energy was around that. The energy was around understanding what's also at stake, and that you can celebrate historic moment, but feeling was that feeling of a movement. When
Yeah.
President Obama ran in 2008, it was a movement, and there were Black men on that call, right? And I received so many text messages from Black men who were excited about the moment. And
Well,
my first call this morning came from Black men saying, "What do we need to do?" Right?
Well, let me say this. Speaking of Black men, Doug, I want to bring you into this part of the conversation. Are you surprised that President Biden moved so quickly? Were you expecting this to happen when it happened?
Absolutely not. The word I received from some of my contacts within the Democratic Party was that he was holding on, that he had not decided to drop out. And it has come out later that this decision just happened on Sunday morning. Or rather early Sunday afternoon, he decided, after seeing some of the polling numbers that they presented him with, that there was no longer a clear path to victory for him. And that given his age and given that the numbers were slipping and getting worse, and there wasn't really a way to make the numbers better, that it would be best for him to step aside and let Kamala Harris, with all of her youth and vigor and energy, to step forward into the breach and lead the party on to victory. So, I was very surprised. And some of his inside members of his staff were surprised, because up until, I believe, that morning, he was still all in. And it wasn't until the afternoon that he made the decision to say, hey, it doesn't look like this is going to work. I'm going to step aside and allow Kamala to move forward. And I think it really is, like the good doctor pointed out, rare for someone to concede power. That is the great fault of most people, that they have difficulty and struggle with conceding power. We saw it play out with devastating consequences with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Barack Obama had a heart-to-heart with her back in 2013, saying, Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg, you're 80 years old and you're recovering from a bout with cancer. You've had a long, distinguished career. Please consider stepping down so I can appoint a new young justice into this position, and we won't have to worry about, if a Republican comes in after me, gets elected after I leave office, of them appointing conservative justice. She refused to step down. And as a result, we have a 6-3 conservative court, which is very different than a 5-4 conservative court. Okay, because that one conservative justice that may be on the fence, it doesn't make any difference if he votes against the majority or not. It's still going to get through. So he's less likely, like a John Roberts, will be less likely to buck the conventional thinking of the majority on the court. So it really is different. And, I was all set to come on here before Biden stepped down and say, this is Joe Bader Biden. But thankfully, he met the moment, and we really have to applaud him for that.
Yeah, I need to make sure that I mention this, Dr. Campbell, and certainly Doug, you can chime in as well. We lost Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee Friday night. What does that mean, Dr. Campbell, for a lioness, if I may, of the House of Representatives? What does her passing mean right now for Congress, and more broadly, for the people that she had been advocating for many years, Black people?
Okay. Oh, thank you. One person she was advocating for, I'm gonna push back on my brother, and that was for the Biden-Harris ticket to stay. And she was definitely on pushing for that to take place, as well as a whole heck of a lot of Black women who helped make that happen. We will have to agree to disagree on whether or not he should step down, but he had the right to make the decision. But he shouldn't have been treated the way he was, because that matters. And if we want to compare ourselves to what's wrong with the Republican Party, Democratic Party leadership should have had a better way of handling what they did, and I'll stand by that. Along with the 8,000 plus women who had signed that letter over the weekend, challenging the Democratic Party to unite. In the same breath, simultaneously, we are excited about Vice President Kamala Harris being endorsed, and just now, a few minutes ago, being endorsed now by Nancy Pelosi. So that's a plus. But I worked really closely, like a lot of people did. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, people coined the phrase, she was the Congresswoman, because she would show up if there was any way. If you were out there fighting for justice, she went to jail with us 3 years ago on July 15th, 2021, and got in a lot of heat for that as a Congresswoman. So the Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, she would do that. We were out there fighting, pushing to get the John Lewis Voting Rights passed, and the Freedom to Vote Act passed. It had been merged with the Senate at that time. She showed up and she went to jail with us, right? With Dr. Janetta Vetch-Cole and others, and Cleola Brown. And we all went pushing for that legislation. We didn't make it across the finish line, but we pushed it through. That made them at least bring it to a vote. And so that's the kind of person that she was. And I think in this moment, we're going to miss her, because she would show up. And people, if you go to Houston, Texas, she showed up to everything, people that I know who were there. So she will be missed, because I think that in this moment, those who loved her and believe in her legacy, you think of Barbara Jordan and how people lift her name. There will be folks lifting up Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee right along there to me with when we talk about Shirley Chisholm. We're going to talk about, there are many others, but Sheila Jackson Lee was one of a kind.
Yeah, I'm going to lose you in just a bit, Dr. Campbell. But before I do, just some final thoughts from you on what this candidacy for Vice President Kamala Harris means for Black women and their vote. I've got about a minute. Just share what you think this means going forward. There's not a lot of time before Election Day, and certainly not a lot of time before the Democratic National Convention.
Yes, I think it's a shot in the arm for mobilization and excitement, and people were looking for change. Well, what did we get change? Right. And I think that is what I'm seeing from groups that are organizing, even on a nonpartisan level. You see the Divine Nine has just announced that they're doing a large voter mobilization, voter registration campaign. I think that's what we're going to see. And as a Black woman, being able to see, knowing that we've been under attack a lot lately, that we know that it's never easy, and that we are excited. I'm excited as a Black woman. I'm excited as a woman. I'm excited as an African American that we have come this far, and there's more to go. But the fact that we have the ability to have the ability to be the leader of the free world, our children it will be normal. We were normalizing that this country is for all of us.
Yeah. Dr. Melanie Campbell, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I always appreciate your input. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. And it's great to be here with you too, my brothers. Let's do this.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation about the fast pace of events, these political events that have been happening regarding President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. Stay with us. The Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM, channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. The Original Quiet Storm continues on WHUR FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We are continuing our discussion about Vice President Kamala Harris, now the presumptive Democratic nominee for president. My guest is Douglas Sloan, Democratic strategist and former first vice president of the D.C. chapter of the NAACP. Doug, as a strategist, one of the things that we saw prior to the announcement that President Biden was going to step away from the race, and coming on the heels of the Republican National Convention, talk to me about the optics. I mean, conventions are there. You know, it's all about the sound and fury, certainly. But while the RNC was going on in Milwaukee, it seemed as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, as if the Democrats were in a bit of disarray. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. And just like the good doctor who was just with us pointed out, it did seem like many Democrats within and outside the Democrat establishment were pushing for Joe Biden to step down. And I'm not saying that that was necessarily a good thing. However, most polling showed that the majority of Americans did not like the two choices available that they had for president of the United States to vote in November. And I think it's very important to point out that the Democrats heard them and changed their option. They now have a new, brighter, energetic option to vote on, or rather vote for in November. So I think it's just very important that the Democrats listen to the people in this regard. And now it is Donald Trump that is the old candidate that's coming up to the plate, and will be the oldest candidate in the history of the country running for president at this time. And I say that, I highlight that because he spent so much time calling Joe Biden old and focusing on Joe Biden's age and so on and so forth. Well, now that's him. By 20 years, he's older than any other candidates in the race. And obviously that's something that Republicans think is important. But yeah, definitely there was disarray. There was back and forth. There was some people in the Democratic Party that were angry that it seemed like Biden was being pushed out. But the numbers do not lie. And the polling numbers were showing that Biden was behind Trump by 4 or 5 points, and they were continuing to slip. And in some states, it was double digits. And quite frankly, there was no way to improve. They weren't going to get any better because Biden wasn't going to get any younger. And it looked like a lot of it had to do with how he was perceived and what people thought of him. And, you know, he's not going to be able to get any younger. So there's no way to make it better. So he saw that. And again, he was very mature. He put country first. I believe that he is going to be instrumental in single-handedly saving us from an existential crisis of our democracy if Trump were to get elected. And, you know, I can't say enough great things about him. In terms of how this country recovered from COVID, we are the #1 leading country on the planet in terms of COVID recovery. In terms of jobs, the job numbers are great. Unemployment is down. Jobs are available for people to get. Again, he's working on a new way to forgive student loans. He's focused on that again. He's trying to expand healthcare. He's working within the parameters that Congress will allow to do all these great things. He signed a gun safety bill into place. No one has ever been able to do that. So he's done a lot of great things in his presidency. We applaud him for it. He's going to continue to do good work as a president. And at this point, we are looking forward to the candidacy and eventual presidency of Kamala Harris.
Let's talk a little bit about the historic similarities and differences. As we know, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was vice president to John F. Kennedy, became president after the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. He was reelected in 1964, but he did not seek re-election in 1968. And what happened was the country ended up with Richard Nixon. There are obviously some similarities. There are some stark differences, obviously, because now we're not talking about an LBJ against a Barry Goldwater in 1964. RFK was assassinated in 68. So, but we're talking about a Black woman, a woman also of South Asian descent. There is no looking at her and saying that there is any kind of racial ambiguity here. This is a woman of color. There is no question about this. The times are different. The politics are different. What's your take on looking at 68 and now 2024?
Yeah, and I believe, and this is before my time, and
mine too, but
yeah, before your time as well. So we have to go back. It's not anything to remember like Reagan when he was shot. I actually remember that, but
yeah,
even though I was in grade school, yeah. But in terms of LBJ, I believe that was George McGovern that ran against Nixon, right, in '68 and lost.
Yeah, I do believe that's the case.
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, I don't remember in history, in my history class, the candidates that were up for election against Nixon in '68. Like I said, I believe it was McGovern that finally ran against him. I believe this is different in that, there was no real time for a robust primary in this regard in present day. There's no time for a robust primary where Dems could hash everything out and choose who they feel is better for the job or best for the job. But this is a very good candidate. Let's not be fooled or take Kamala lightly. She is a former prosecutor, and she is going up against a convicted felon. Prosecutor versus felon. I'm going with the prosecutor.
Okay.
Trump represents, unlike Nixon at the time, what they call in the military a target-rich environment. She can debate Trump 5 days in a row, an hour at a time, and attack him on something different each night and not have to worry about going back to what she talked about the night before. I mean, Trump has it from the 34 counts on which he was convicted on of paying off a porn star to the racism that he exhibited when him and his father were sued by DOJ for refusing to rent apartments in their apartment building to Black people in New York back in the 70s and 80s, to all of this stuff that just came out regarding Julian Epstein and the flight logs and these lawsuits of showing accusations of rape of underage girls and boys by Donald Trump, to him cheating on all of his wives, to seditious conspiracy, to I mean, it just goes on and on. What I'm saying. So I guess what I'm saying is this is going to be very interesting, and Kamala has a lot to go on, and I'm really excited for this race because, like the doctor said earlier, she was just on that call of Black women, principally Black women and Black men and others, of 44,000 people on a Zoom call. And I know people that tried to get on that call and couldn't because it was too crowded. And they raised, I believe, $1 million, $1.5 million on that call that goes into the kitty of, what was it, $80 million that has been raised by Act Blue for Kamala Harris since her campaign was announced yesterday. She has caught fire.
But so and with all of the things that some people would consider character or personality deficits with former President Trump, but his party is still supporting him. And so we know enthusiastically supporting him. And so we may be looking at a battle of enthusiasm. One of the things that I do find really interesting, speaking about Republicans, Mike Pence, former Vice President Mike Pence, released a statement today saying that he believes that Joe Biden did his stepping aside for the 2024 campaign was he did what was best for the country. I was very in one way I was really surprised by that. But on the other hand, Mike Pence said that he was not going to endorse or support Donald Trump. And this seems to me to be a moment where Mike Pence basically said, I said what I said.
And you're right. Not only is Mike Pence not endorsing or supporting Donald Trump, but 40 of 44 members of Donald Trump's cabinet when he was president are not endorsing or supporting Donald Trump. So that's very telling. And I didn't catch wind of Pence's announcement, but that he believes that Biden did the right thing to step aside. That means that he also believes that Kamala has a much better chance of beating Trump in the general election. And right now, there is no fresh polling. We haven't had a chance to do any polling yet from yesterday's announcement. But the last polls that they did show that Kamala was polling ahead of Biden against Trump. And it was
in some polls.
Yeah,
in some polls, she is. In other polls, not so much. But as you said, there is no fresh polling. And to put a fine point on it, Mike Pence's statement only mentioned Biden. He did not mention Vice President Kamala Harris. His statement specifically spoke about President Biden in stepping down, doing what's best for the country. But it did not suggest that he thought that Kamala Harris could or could not beat Donald Trump. But the other thing, when you talk about just kind of where we are right now, there is going to be another debate. What kind of problems do you think that Donald Trump will have in debating a Kamala Harris that he perhaps did not have with a top of his game Joe Biden?
Well, Kamala is ready for this moment. Kamala has been a prosecutor. She has been prosecuting the case for women's reproductive rights for the past 3 years, which is a very big issue in this country. She has experience in debating, in prosecuting a case before a judge and litigating. So she has experience in this regard. Donald Trump has been a real estate mogul his whole life, so he doesn't have a lot of experience. Trump and the Trump campaign would have much rather continue to run against Joe Biden here. Biden, I know you said what's the advantage of a top of his game Joe Biden? Well, top of his game Joe Biden would have been great, and he wouldn't have had to pull out, and he would have won just like he did last time. But, unfortunately, we're not looking at a top of his game Joe Biden here. And instead, it looks like we're getting a top of her game, Kamala Harris. And trust and believe that Kamala Harris will shred Donald Trump in any debate. Like I said earlier, this is a target-rich environment for Harris. And I just don't see where Trump is going to be able to gain a solid footing against her. I know that some people are saying, well, he's gonna go after her for the border and maybe go after her for some of the other ills of the Biden administration. But the fact remains that she's vice president and Biden has been president, and we all know that the president doesn't have to check or clear any of his decisions with the vice president before he makes them. Al Gore famously disagreed with Bill Clinton on some of his decisions and some of his policies. So, those are Biden policies, not necessarily Harris policies. So I really think that Trump is going to struggle. To get back to your question, Trump is going to struggle to find a footing that he will be able to use to effectively attack Harris. And Harris is in a target-rich environment here. So, the Democrats at this point are salivating for a chance to debate. We'll do a debate every 2 weeks, every other week if necessary. But this is really a boon for Democrats, and I'm looking forward to the next few months. I think it's 105 days to the election, and we're all for it.
You mentioned the border as a point of attack for Vice President Kamala Harris, a soft spot for her. I would argue that is not something that is easily dismissed. I can't speak certainly about when you talk about, Black voters, anecdotally speaking, Democratic Black voters. That is not one of the top issues that they are discussing.
Correct.
But when you talk about Republican voters, particularly, white conservative voters who live in southern and western states, that may be their first issue. Is she vulnerable when it comes to the border conversation?
Again, I don't think so. I feel that is more of a Biden policy initiative than a Harris policy initiative. She will have an opportunity to present her policy initiatives in the direction that she wants to lead the country as we move forward in this campaign. We will see her policy initiatives as she puts them forward, and some of them will differ from Biden's. So I can't say that, again, she may be vulnerable on that point. And also, a very important point to consider is that, you're right, that conservatives still may be mad at her about the border, but Joe Biden proved in 2020 that you can win with Democrats and independents. Trump cannot win with only Republicans. It is incumbent upon Trump to pull independents and moderate Democrats over to his side. Given all the vitriolic rhetoric and January 6th and all the indictments and convictions that have happened since 2020, I just don't see that happening. They're not independents and moderate Democrats are not looking at Trump now after all that and saying, I think I'm going to head over to Trump. But they are looking at the Democratic Party and now Kamala Harris, especially since any concerns about Biden not being up to the job and his age are now dismissed. So, even if, that's a top issue for Republicans, we're really not going to be able to move them anyway out of that red basket. But it's the blue basket of Democrats and the gray basket of independents that we are focused on, and that can win the election, as Biden proved in 2020.
So how soon do you believe that Vice President Harris needs to move on her own vice president pick, assuming that she does get the nomination at the DNC? I mean, obviously, with all of these people kind of coalescing around her, we could see more of the Democratic leadership begin to support her. So assuming, for the sake of this conversation, that she does become the nominee, do you believe that she is talking to potential candidates right now, today, for vice president?
I believe that her staff is reaching out to some of the top candidates under consideration. They would be foolish not to. Also, excuse me, the Democratic nomination is going to happen before the convention. They're going to do a virtual roll call of votes.
Right.
Many states have already started pledging their delegates to Kamala. Like I said earlier, she's caught fire. $80 million within 24 hours is catching fire. She's on fire right now. And everybody's coming in. Nancy Pelosi just came in. The Clintons just came in. Everybody's coming on to her side. Everybody is supporting her because, you know, something else that I didn't mention earlier, but is important. This race is not just about voting for Kamala. This race is also about voting against Donald Trump. So that's what's driving a lot of this energy. So yes, it's very important that she identifies a strong, or rather she picks a strong candidate for vice president. Some of the different candidates that are under consideration, well, most importantly, let's just say the most important states that the Democrats, rather in Kamala, have to win to put this nomination in the bag are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. So that's where you should start with your VPs. Look at the governors of those three states. In Wisconsin, it's Governor Evers, who's a nice guy, but he's in his 70s. So I don't think they're going there. Michigan is Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who is very popular in Michigan. However, she has said repeatedly that she is not leaving Michigan right now. She said that repeatedly. So that may take her out of consideration. The third is Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who came out early endorsing Kamala Harris. I believe he endorsed her yesterday evening or yesterday afternoon. And I know he's a strong consideration. And I think that he not only will he bring the state of Pennsylvania along, but he'll help to bring along some of those other Midwestern lunch bell union states that we need to win, i.e. Michigan and Wisconsin.
What about Mark Kelly in Arizona?
Senator Mark Kelly in Arizona is also under strong consideration, would be a strong pick because he would bring along the state. He should be able to bring along the state of Arizona, even though he's a freshman senator. However, we want to be careful with messing with our majority in the Senate. Right now, we're going to lose a seat because Joe Manchin isn't running. And we're a little fuzzy on if John Tester can win up in Montana. So I don't know if that would be a good idea to take him out of his Senate seat. Now, I know that Arizona has a Democratic governor, and they're going to appoint a Democratic senator into that position, Democratic senator in that position. However, there's only 2 years left. That race is coming up in 2026, and this person would come in 2025, essentially have 1 year, and then would have to start running in 2026. So I don't know if that's enough lead time to put a strong candidate in place that's going to be able to ingratiate himself with all the voters in Arizona and run a strong campaign in 2026. We really got to be careful with what we do with the Senate. So I wouldn't, if I was advising Kamala Harris campaign, I wouldn't advise that she do that. They're also talking about Roy Cooper in North Carolina, Andy Beshear in Kentucky, Pritzker in Illinois, and even Pete Buttigieg and Wes Moore in Maryland. But I think that we would be best off with Pennsylvania, one of the governors of the three states, and I think Pennsylvania fits that bill perfectly with Josh Shapiro.
Why not Andy Beshear in Kentucky?
He won't even be able to bring his own state along. I mean, we're not winning. Kentucky isn't in play, and Kentucky doesn't have that many votes. It's not pivotal. It's not pivotal like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So I don't think that's a logical choice because it's not a pivotal state. It's not in play, and he won't be able to bring it into play.
But okay, so if not Kentucky, then, and you mentioned Roy Cooper, that's a southern state.
That is.
So why not Roy Cooper? You know, she's from California, and you know, wouldn't it be helpful? I'm asking, wouldn't it be helpful to have a southern state, a North Carolina, that on that ticket?
Absolutely, it would. Although the Democrats have not won North Carolina since our Messiah, Barack Obama, won it back in 2012. At this stage, that's what he is. But it would be helpful. It would be a good pick, and I wouldn't necessarily be mad there. Hopefully, he could bring it along and turn North Carolina blue. It has been close in the last. It was close in the last election, I believe. However, it doesn't count for as many electoral votes as Pennsylvania. And this is a numbers game in terms of getting to that magical number of 270. So we know that Josh Shapiro is there. He's young for politics. He's 51 years old, and he will help bring Pennsylvania along, which is more in play for Democrats than North Carolina.
Yeah, I know there was also some talk about Wes Moore.
Right.
Definitely, from my limited political knowledge, definitely too soon. I don't think America is ready for, and I could be wrong, to black people. Yeah. I just don't.
Same thing with two women. I wouldn't try it right now. I wouldn't try two women. I wouldn't try two people of color right now. Right now, we need a milquetoast white guy that's coming out of a big swing state that's in play.
Yeah. Speaking of the women question, and I keep saying this is America. Kamala Harris could really shift the dynamic because of her age, her education, her political resume. But I'll ask you what I always ask the political experts on this program. If America was not willing or ready to elect a Hillary Clinton, what makes you think that they are ready to elect a Kamala Harris? Exactly.
No.
There you go.
I'm just concerned about what I'm going to say, and also thinking about your audience and how this is going to sound. But I have to keep it 100, like the kids say. I got to keep it a buck.
Okay.
Black women are going to be much more supportive of a black female candidate than white women, and I can't explain why that is. White women voted for Trump in 2016 when Hillary was on the ballot, and again in 2020. And there's a good chance they'll vote for him again in 2024. And I can't explain why that is. Trump has come across, he is severely limited your right to abortion in most states. They're talking about with the Project 2025 that all of his people put together, they're talking about a nationwide abortion ban. Women's reproductive rights are on the table. This guy, he's being accused of rape. He was found guilty of raping E. Jean Carroll in a civil suit in New York. There are all these other accusations of rape in some of these lawsuits that were filed, and some were withdrawn because of the threats made against the people that were making them. And he's documented evidence he's cheated on every single one of his wives. I just don't understand how women, or Christian evangelicals for that matter, would support this man.
Go ahead, 30 seconds, Doug. Go ahead, finish your point.
Black women are going to come out much more for one of their own, Kamala Harris, who is an HBCU graduate and a member of the Divine Nine, than white women. And I couldn't tell you why that is, but that has been the case, and we see it in the votes.
Doug Sloan, good to see you, man. Thank you so very much for your input. We will keep you on the list so we can continue to walk through this. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great to be here.
That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, July 22nd. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.